What I'm going to talk about this session is really a little bit different than what I've been talking about as far as being involved, externally focused, and what that means. We really want to talk about some leadership principles about how do we bring diverse ministry together, because all of us have different passions, we have different gifts, we have different interests, and when we try to blend that together, sometimes there can be some issues. So I want to give some what I consider just some leadership challenges related to that. And regardless of whether we are a volunteer or we are a business person who's active in our local congregation and ministry, whether we're a pastor or a mission organization or a missionary somewhere, at the end of the day, there are some basic issues that we all have to deal with and wrestle with. I love Isaiah 32:8. It was a verse that I for a long time, I don't know why I'd never seen it or heard it, but it says this: "The noble man makes noble plans, and by his noble deeds he stands." And I wish the Bible would go on and describe to us what a noble person is like there, but we don't get that. What we do get is a description in the first few verses above it, verses 5 through 8 there, that talk about what a foolish person is like. And a foolish person is one who doesn't know the Lord, who speaks error actually against the Lord, who his feet are quick to run away from God towards evil, who withholds water from the thirsty and food from the hungry. And he describes that person, this foolish person, and then he ends with this: "But the noble man makes noble plans, and by his noble deeds he stands." And ultimately, I believe God has invited us to be vested in what he's doing. Proverbs 16:9 is probably where I've hung my hat for a long time. "The mind of man plans his ways, and God directs our steps." In other words, I think God has given you the ability to think and dream and scheme and counsel and strategize and plan and be open then to him directing his steps. I have to be honest, there have been times in my ministry when I've done all the planning. You know, God, I've got this all figured out. You're busy. There's a lot of people in the world. I thought there's just one or two pieces. If you could nudge them together for me, my life would be easier and you would be blessed. And then there have been some times that I've gone up into the mountains where I live. I live in a beautiful part of the world, and I've gone up into the national park, and I've sat by a stream on a rock and said, "Okay, God, tell me the plan." What I've discovered for me, is when I bring both halves of that verse together, the mind of man plans his ways. God's given us ability to do that. He's given passions, things that are on your heart, things that you've seen, things you care about. And I invite God in to help me see those things and prepare those things and plan those things and allow God to direct our steps. And here's how it's happened for me through the years. That when I take a step towards, God will either open or close the door for me. But when I've sat still, there aren't a whole lot of doors opening or closing yet for me. What's the best way to change the direction of a car? It's when it's moving, isn't it? Parked cars are hard to change the direction of. But when a car is moving, it can be directed. And that's what I've discovered, is God's invited me to step into what I can see right now, what I know. And pray and ask him to guide and direct my steps. I'd never wanted to be in ministry. I really struggled with that early on. And I grew up in upstate New York, and when I did head towards ministry, what I wanted to do was go back and plant churches in upstate New York. There aren't very many churches there, and that's what I really wanted to go do, and it just never really worked out for me. And I was working for a youth organization, traveling around the country speaking, and I ended up as an associate pastor in a weird way in Fort Myers, Florida, which is about as far south in our country as you can go. I never wanted to live in the South, and I never wanted to be on staff on a church. If I was going to be there, I wanted to be doing something different. And we landed down in Fort Myers, and we were there about 5 years. And just about the time I thought, boy, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life, I ended up getting invited to go help out a turnaround situation for a seminary up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I never wanted to work in college administration or do that or get involved in that. And when I went there, I said, we'll only be here 1 year. And we ended up there 5 years, in kind of this weird way that happened. And just about the time I thought, I could kind of get used to this living here in the Midwest. And I was out speaking on my way to a business conference in California, and I stopped at this little church in Longmont, Colorado. Longmont's this kind of dusty town outside of Denver, and I never wanted to live in that direction of the part of the world. Didn't have any interest in the West, and in just a God way, 8 weeks after I spoke there, we were moving our family, our young family, out there. We've been there now 21 years. Lately, I've been praying, Lord, I don't ever want to go to Hawaii. Don't ever send me there. You know, the mind of man plans his ways. God directs his steps. I don't know what God's put on your heart. I don't know what you're seeing, what's coming out of this conference, what you're feeling, but you don't have to have the whole picture figured out. Sometimes we just step into what we see and allow God to continue to direct our steps. And my prayer for you is that that's going on over these few days, and that God's at work in your heart. So as a leader, whether you lead a large organization, or whether you are a pastor of a church, or you are the CEO of a business, or you own a small ice cream stand, there's something you need to think about a little bit every day. There's 3 things that you should think about just a little bit every day. And I think it has to do, if we're going to really help ministry move forward and coordinate the efforts of others. And here's the first thing. It's vision. Where are we going? Where is it that we're headed? What dreams do we have? What are the passions and plans? What is the Proverbs 16:9, the part where we plan and scheme and strategize? And where is it that we're inviting God into this? Where is it that we're going? Because if we have no idea where we're going, then we're going to create a whole lot of problem sources. And I'm not talking about that general, this kind of fuzzy, we just want to love people and win the world. I'm talking about where and how will you begin to head that direction. There's a great scene in the book Alice in Wonderland. And Alice is looking to get out of the Wonderland, and she's wandering around. She comes to a fork in the road, and at the fork in the road is a Cheshire cat. And she says to the cat, "Which way do I go?" And the cat asks her, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I don't know." And the cat said, "If you don't know where you're going, then one road is just as good as another." Where is it you're going right now? Where is the ministry you're involved in? Where's the business you're involved in? Where is that headed? What are some of the end things that you want? There's an old Chinese proverb that says, if we keep heading in the same direction, we are likely to get where we're headed. If you keep going down the path you're going right now, where is that going to take you? And if you don't like where it's taking you, then there is a really obvious question. Why are you doing that? Why are you going that way? Back in my 20s, which was a couple of years ago, I used to teach a lot of management stuff in seminars. And I used to teach that vision was a clear, compelling, magnetic image of a preferable future. Did you catch that sentence? A clear, compelling, magnetic image of a preferable future. I used to teach that because it sounded significant. And I was 20-something, and I was looking for stuff that sounded significant. Here's what I've learned about vision over the last 30 years. That it's a glimpse of the future. And that every time it goes by, I get a little more glimpse, and I can describe it a little further, and I can add a little more color to it. And that really it isn't that I always know every detail, every single thing, but rather, here's what I believe God is doing and where we're going. And so for us as a church, there's been 3 transitions two transitions I've taken us through, and I just said to our leaders, our elders, a year and a half ago, I've helped our church transition twice without killing it. I think I have one more in me before I'm done. The first transition was this. I arrived to a church that the previous pastor had been there 31 years, terrific guy. The last 2 years were pretty bumpy in the road. There was a lot of conflict going on in a church that was running about 400 and losing ground. They had planted a church, and that new plant was just taking all the young families. They were an old downtown church in this community, and 6 weeks after I arrived, they celebrated their 100th anniversary. It was a very traditional church, and we had all the good stuff. You know, they had Sunday morning and Sunday school and Sunday night and Wednesday night, and then they had ministries, you know, that were really good stuff, bowling for blessings and crocheting for Christ and jogging for Jesus, all the really cool things. And when I arrived, I said, we need to simplify here, and we need to be a church that's going to reach people who don't go to church. And so we're going to do that. We're going to have to open up some doors here. And so we did. We opened up a lot of side doors, recovery ministries and sports ministries and some other things that really just helped us connect with people. And a lot of people were coming to Christ, and the church started growing. And then I landed in that camp I shared with you the first night that while we had gotten over at this point, we'd gotten to 1,500 or 1,700 or so, I was concerned whether our church was making any difference in our city. And so we transitioned from traditional to attractional. How do we get people to show up? How can we get them to come here? And how do we make sure we do a good job when they come here? And how do we speak their language? For example, even now, today, I'll say something like, we're going to look at a story from John chapter 5. Now, John's in the New Testament. It's one of the Gospels. It's about 3/4 of the way through your Bible. And invariably, I'll have some older person in our church come to me, even now, after 21 years. I don't know why you keep telling us that. We know where stuff is in the Bible. But what I wanted to do was for that person who'd showed up for the first time, I wanted them to know it was okay that they didn't know. And so we did attractional stuff. I didn't have language for it then. Those are words I didn't know at the time, but we shifted from traditional to attractional. And then we asked that question, if our church disappeared, would anyone care? And we started doing more missional things. And so we moved from attractional to more missional. Again, I didn't know the words for it, didn't have language for it. And now we're kind of moving more towards missional, I suppose, with feet on it for us. In other words, how is it that we're really making a difference neighborhood by neighborhood? I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow, but one of our big challenges right now to our folks is, what would happen if you just happened to be the best neighbor your neighbor ever had? What would that look like? What would happen if you prayed for your neighbor, not because you're a Christian, not because you want them to be a Christian, but because you are a Christian? What would happen if we served in our neighborhoods? What would that look like? And so we're doing this more simple thing of gathering together as we honor God and scattering back out into our neighborhoods and workplaces and trying to be the hands and feet of Christ. And so managing transition like that has to do with, where are we going? Do you have any idea where your ministry is headed right now, where the thing you're involved in is going? The second part of that, though, that you have to think about if you're leading every day is bottom line. Can we really get there? I have friends who are great dreamers. They got huge dreams, big dreams, massive dreams. I mean, just like, holy cow, knock you over dreams. But they have no idea how to put any feet on those. In other words, what resources do we have to make this happen, and how can we make it sustainable? And if this is really where God is taking us, how do we do the part we can do? And so we can open the door for Him to do the part He can do. In other words, do we have the capability to get where we want to go? And if we don't, what will it take to do that? And how do we get this down into manageable and bite-sized chunks? And how do we tackle some of the things we can do that are on our way to a bigger picture so that we can get to that bigger picture? It's one thing to be a dreamer. It's one thing to stand up in front of folks and share with them this huge vision you have. But what will it take to get there? There's somebody's got to help with that bottom line stuff. Can we really make this work? And then the third thing you need to think a little bit about every day is succession. In other words, who we bring in with us. And in ministry, that should just be so natural to us. You know, that kind of whole Paul, Barnabas, Timothy thing that we've got going on. And yet in ministry, so often it isn't. How are we helping others come along? How are we bringing them along in the process? Who is it that we're engaged with right now, that we're handing things over to, and so that we can do other things? One of the keys for us to know whether or not we're going to move forward in a staff position, we have about 75 staff people in our church, and that would include everybody, facilities and others. And we try to stay lean staff. Our attendance on the weekend is around 3,500. We have 4 campuses, and so I think having less staff is better. And so we have a lot of key volunteers who drive ministry. But when we make the shift from whether a volunteer is going to come on board, it isn't, are they doing enough that we need to start paying for that? It's, are they capable enough so that when they come on board, they can multiply what they do? That they're not doing what they're doing now. A year from now, they're doing something different than what they were doing. That they're empowering other people to lead. And so who is it that you're bringing along with you? Because those three things, vision, where are we going, bottom line, what will it take to get there, and succession, who is coming behind us, are critical factors for us if we're going to have a successful anything. And I believe it's a biblical model that we see happen. Paul and Peter were regularly investing in the lives of other leaders and empowering them and challenging them so that they could invest in the lives of other leaders, so that they could invest in the lives of other people. Because when we're managing change, there's always somebody who is not going to be for it. I know that's going to come as a shocker to you. There are going to be people who just don't like what you do. I remember when I went and interviewed at our church, and we were talking about what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go, and their big thing was, well, we're really not growing and we're not really being very evangelistic. We really need to reach more people in Christ. And there was one person in particular who was so passionate about that. And before I even moved there, I knew this would be the guy who would resist it once we started doing stuff that actually reached people. And sure enough, we were right. Because he had this thing, well, we got to really reach more people. And then we started doing stuff that were reaching more people, but there were some things in that were uncomfortable for him. He didn't like. I mean, somebody actually sat in his seat one week and really hosed him up. And God only speaks to him in that one seat, I guess. And, not everybody who jumps on board with you at the beginning are the people who are going to be on board with you as you go along. If you're a church planter, you know this, you've experienced this. There's that thing called the death of the dream. When all these local Christians get excited because you're starting this new church and they have this picture of what that church is going to be like. And then when you're not that picture, we'll have to find some other place. And so, I don't know if you've ever seen this graph before. It's called the diffusion of innovation. If you want to launch something new, if you want to begin something new in your business or ministry, here's how it works. And it's a great little chart. There's only about 3% of people who are actually innovators. People who come up with new stuff. I mean, they're the kind of people that I don't know how God has wired them. I don't know how they work, but they just have the ability to just, man, they can create, whether it's in technology or in business or in ministry, they just have that ability. There's about 3% of people that can do it. There are 13% of people who are early adopters. They see something, they hear something, and they can get on board with it, right? They capture it. Someone describes something, and they know, wow, we could do something with this. This could be a great thing for our ministry. This could be a great thing across our campuses, whatever that might be. The bulk of people are in either middle adopters or late adopters. In other words, the middle adopters are the ones who kind of come along. They hear some things, they see some things, they get involved, they have a picture of what that might be like, and they jump on. The late adopters, they're the resistors. They're the ones asking questions like, whose idea is this really? And is it going to work? And how are we going to pay for it? And we've tried that before. It didn't work. It was 62 years ago, but still. And then there are the laggards. I don't know if you realize this or not, but it's true in business and a lot of established companies, and it's true in the church, particularly in the church, that our boards, however your boards, your leadership teams are configured, are almost always made up of a lot of late adopters. And the reason is they've been there, they're steady, they have influence. And so there's some challenge here. Well, let me give you, when we went through that first transition, tradition to attractional, and then attractional to missional, both times I had some innovators. I went to some people that are just, man, they're ready, they're dreaming, they're going, and I listened and I got their input and we prayed and we just got an excitement about doing something, and then we started on a couple of things. When we started getting involved in our community, we did not start with a campaign. We didn't start with slogans. We didn't have T-shirts. We didn't have. I didn't get up and preach on this for a dozen weeks. We just started with some people that cared about this and wanted to do it. Because I had no idea what it was going to look like, and I didn't know how we were going to get there. And so there were some people in our church who really were passionate about this, and we just started blessing that and encouraging that. And then I started telling some stories about that. Or they would get up and tell a story about that. And some of those early adopters were like, man, I want to be a mentor at the public schools. I want to help in the social service. And so there were some early adopters. And then we started doing some event things in the life of our church. We did some big service days where we'd go out and serve the community for a whole day, or our public schools, or whatever it might be. And it was recruitment intensive, and we got everybody on board, and we made a big thing. And that's where we started picking up a lot of those middle adopters. True story. We've been doing this since at least 1995, if not really before that. There was a guy who was an elder when I first came to the church. He stepped out of eldership after I'd been there a few years with some encouragement. And no, I'm kidding. He stepped out for some health reasons at the time, and then he got through that and he was fine, but he never came back on our eldership. And so he's been in the church the whole time I've been there, and he was there before I was there, okay? And just 3 weeks ago, he said, our Bible study that's been together for right around the resurrection. They've been together a long time. He said, our Bible study all summer long has been helping take care of some widows in our neighborhood. And he said, I got to tell you, it's been like the coolest thing we've ever done. And I wanted to say, Bill, we've been doing this for almost 20 years. He's a late adopter. Actually, he's a laggard. Actually, he's here's an interesting thing. If you want to implement change, I'm not sure you always want to launch with the big thing, because you get all the late adopters and laggards, and even some of the middle adopters who are pretty skeptical and are not sure, and they're going to shoot holes. Because here's how this works. Change, each group only influences the group immediately adjacent to it. So the late adopters influence the middle adopters, and they influence the laggards. The middle adopters influence the late adopters, and they influence the early adopters. The early adopters influence the innovators and the middle adopters. And so if you get too far ahead without enough resource and enough plan and enough concept where this might go, you get a chance for the late adopters to influence before you ever get things off the ground. A lot of times things don't succeed in the life of our ministries is because we really have not gotten enough people on board early on to help us move through that. So one of the questions we ask about some of the ministries we're doing, we do this exercise regularly. Let me put up this other graph here. And this graph for us describes, we do this all the time, and every ministry area does this on a regular, ongoing basis. What are we doing that's working? And we start asking questions like, why is it working? And are there circumstances we're controlling that are working? Are there circumstances that are beyond our control that are working? Are there external, internal factors related to that make a difference for us? And for us, it's focused around, hey, there are some things working. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Then we ask what's stuck, what's not working for us? What are some things that we think should be working, but they just seem to be stuck? And then we ask the question, what do we need to abandon? Because the truth is, some of the things you're doing now, you really shouldn't be doing. They worked for you for a time. They were important to you for a time. But they really shouldn't be a part of what you're doing as you roll forward in the future. And then, what could we start? What's a need? What's something we see? What's something that we believe God's laying on our heart? And for us, all of this revolves around our mission. When I went to LifeBridge, their mission statement was 5 words. It was to edify, encourage, exhort, exalt, and I could never remember because there was a sentence with every one of them. And the last one, I think, the fifth E was eat, I think. It was what we did. We gathered together as a church. We ate a lot. And so our elders and our staff at the time, there were 3 of us on staff, our elders and our staff met with our leadership. We included some volunteers. We spent 3 months just individually praying, asking God, where is it you want the church to go? What is it we ought to be doing? And then we gathered for a retreat weekend, and 24 hours of that was just praying. And then we started talking about what had God been laying on our heart. And for the last 18 years, our mission statement has been very simple. It's to lead people in a growing relationship with Jesus. And we define everything, whether that's helping us do that or not do that. And our elders, we would consider ourselves staff-led and elder-protected. And our elders' responsibilities are the mission, health, and ministry of our church, and for us, the spiritual health and ministry of our church. And really, as a staff, we kind of drive a bit of where we're going. Is this helping us lead people in a growing relationship with Jesus? What's working in that? What are we doing that we think works? What's not working in that? And are there things we ought to get rid of? And one of the things I ask our ministries to do right now is every year, stop something you've been doing and start something new. You figure out what you ought to stop, and you figure out what you should start. Because if not, we get very entrenched in doing what we've been doing. And sometimes there was a reason to do it that no longer exists or is of value or need. But see, all of us have to wrestle with that somehow. We just use this as a tool to help us get through that. I want to give you some principles that have been for me, they're kind of time-tested principles, really, that have kind of worked from a leadership standpoint and just whatever it is that I've been involved in. And they're very basic principles. They're biblical principles. The first one is this. You'll recognize it. It's called the farming principle. You reap what you sow. Whatever you're planting right now is going to show up somewhere. We tell people this in our church all the time right now. Right now, if you're sowing seeds in your life, those seeds are going to give fruit sometime. And what kind of fruit's going to be born? It might take a while for that fruit to show up, but eventually this is going to come out of your life. It's that computer term, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, good in, good out, right? We get that. And we only get out what we put in. So where is it you're making investment right now? The things that you're working on, the things that you're praying about, the things you're planning for, the places that are getting your effort. What are the things that you hope they produce? Because the truth is, the seeds you're planting right now are going to give fruit in your life somewhere, some way. If you're going to plant the right things, if you're going to harvest the right things, you've got to plant the right things. And what is it you want? A little boy said to his grandfather one time, "Grandpa, can you make a sound like a frog?" And his grandfather said, "Well, I can, but how come?" He said, "Because Mom said when you croak, we'll be rich." Is that what you want? It's got to have some stuff happen in that. What are you planting right now? What investments are you making right now? Where is it that you're giving your time and your energy? Who gets the most of you right now? Because those are going to show back up sometime. Let me give you a big deal one. It's called the principle of the critical few. Or you could call it the principle of planned neglect. You can't do everything. So what are you doing? What are the things that you're focusing your energy and effort on? And are they in the right place? Does anyone have a book I could borrow for just a second, just for an illustration? You don't mind falling on the floor? Perfect. Thanks, Lise. So I want this book to get on the floor. What I'm after is that I got to get that book onto the floor. And so I'm back here and I'm pressing and I'm pushing and I'm giving a lot of energy and effort and I'm doing everything I can, but I'm not in the right spot. The principle of the critical few says, since I can't do everything, what's going to get my focused effort? Where am I going to get the best results from? Where am I going to, if I put my energy and effort here, I'm going to see some things happen, because it's a lot easier if I get in the right spot. But the problem for ministers is this. And I want to be careful because of this sound system in the back. I sat back last night, and sometimes it bounces and some words get garbled. The problem in the ministry is that, here's what I've discovered for me. Maybe it's not true for you. One of the reasons I've struggled in ministry is because people should on me. They do. In fact, sometimes I've discovered I should on myself. People should on me. You should do this. You should do that. You should be here. Right down here, she started breathing again. It was like... That's what they do, don't they? And I do it to myself. Man, I should be here. I should be there. I should be doing this. The principle of the critical few is asking, what should you really be doing? Mastery is the art of purposeful limitation. Let me say that again. Mastery is the art of purposeful limitation. You only have so much time. You only have so much energy. You only have so many resources. What is it that you're giving your heart and life and energy and work to? Are you proactive or are you reactive? Reactive means that I'm constantly reacting to whoever's squeaking the loudest, which may not be what needs to get my attention. Now, I get the part of ministry and why that's hard for us, because there's a lot of people who have needs and expectations, and we have some volunteers we go to all the hospitals in our area every day to visit people, and people in our church and others that we get asked to see. And one of our staff members does that, and we have a bunch of volunteers who also do that. And one of the volunteers was seeing an older lady one time, and she said to him, "When's that pastor going to come and see me?" And he said, "Ma'am, you don't want to be that sick." So when I tell that at church now, just a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine was in the hospital. I went to see him. He said, "Oh, no." Mastery is the art of purposeful limitation. What's going to get the best of you? What's going to get your energy? What's going to get your resources? Let me give you a third principle. It's a tough one. It's called the risk principle. And the risk principle basically says this: there is risk involved if I'm going to lead. Not everything I plan works. Henry Banks said, if at first you do succeed, try to hide your astonishment. Not everything we launch out in is successful. I doubt there's a person in the room who hasn't felt like God's really laid something on their heart, and they prayed and it came in a picture and all the things, and then we started and it failed, and you catch yourself going, "God, what was that all about?" And what we do is we shift the blame over to God for something that didn't work. Not everything does work. Let's suppose I didn't know if I could walk, and I held onto this podium, and I went to seminars about walking. I listened to inspirational music about walking. I was in a small group on why I should walk. I had motivational posters on my wall about walking, and I never let go of this podium. What happens? I never know if I can walk, right? But when I let go, when I am free to fail, I'm free to succeed. Only when I'm free to fail am I free to succeed. When I let go, I take a step. I might walk, I might fall, but I'll never know until I let go. The risk principle means that Charles Kettering said, "You never stub your toe standing still." Isn't that true? And what if you and I waited for every traffic light to be green before we took off in our car? Let's say we were driving just from here to Cape Town, or a long trip to Joburg, and we waited. We'd be here forever, wouldn't we? We'd never leave the parking lot. Sometimes you start, sometimes you stop. It's this idea that we move forward, but we have to take some risks to do that. And some of us get caught playing it so safe. Well, the fourth principle is the principle of self-management. It basically says this: if you can't manage yourself, you really can't manage others. How many of you have ever said this statement? I did for a long time. I work better under pressure. Anybody ever said that? A few hands. Here's what this may not be true for you. I know it was true for me. I didn't work better under pressure. I worked under pressure. I did the things I knew I needed to do, but I could have been doing them a long time before that. The couple of books that we have here at the Resource Center that I did, those were painful for me. I'm not a writer. I don't really like writing. I'd rather talk. And they'd give me a deadline. And in the first book, the editor said, well, the deadline is September 1st for you to have your manuscript in, but really we don't need it till November 1st. And I thought to myself, she should have never told me that. Guess when she got the book? November 29th. Because I figured if she meant November 1st, she probably really meant December 1st. So I didn't work under pressure. I didn't work better. I just worked. In fact, sometimes my work was not as good as it could be. That self-management says, what am I doing to manage my time? What am I doing to assess where I'm going and resource what I'm doing and figure that? One of my goals in life personally is to get the people with nothing to do to want to quit doing it with me. Did you catch that? That was too fast, maybe. The people with nothing to do, I want them to quit doing it with me. You know, the people that just show up at your office. Hey, Pastor, what are you doing? Nothing. I was sitting around here just hoping somebody'd come. Thanks. You know. And this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Why are we like this? The phone rings in the middle of the night. Did I wake you? Oh, no. I was up praying. What is it about us that's like that? I don't know. The principle of self-management has this idea that there are some things I'm going to be doing. Now, let me give you, I think I have enough time for this. Let me give you a quick time management tool. I used to teach that if you were going to get your time management stuff right, then you needed to go through all the stuff you're doing. How many of you have ever done this exercise? You wrote everything down that you were doing, all the activities you had. Anybody ever done that? Okay, a few of you, two of you. And then if you're going to do time management, what you do is you prioritize those, right? How many has ever done that? A, B, C? You've done that? And then if you went to a really expensive time management seminar, the stuff we used to teach, that got paid for, we would do A1s, A2s, A3s. All right? Has that ever worked for anybody? No. It doesn't work because we start at the wrong end of the stick. We ought to start at the other end of the stick. And let me give it to you very quickly. Here's the other end of the stick. It's a very simple formula. It's called PGA, like the golf, the Ryder Cup, which we are currently ahead on right now. Just saying. Start with purposes. What do you want to be? Our church does this. Our staff and elders do this. What do we want to be as a church? And those to be statements are fuzzy statements. They're ethereal statements. There's not a lot of clarity to them. They're directional statements. For example, I'll give you some of mine. I've been doing this for 22 years now at a personal level. Some of mine this year, I want to continue to be a better father and husband. I want to be a better communicator. I want to be a better leader. There are a lot of those to be statements. I want to be a more gracious person. That one has hit my list the last 2 years. Now, we set to be statements, and they're like New Year's resolutions, right? They don't give us any direction. Oh boy, we feel good about it, but we're 2 days into the new year and we've quit doing it. Because then we have to sit and create some value statements that help us get there. If this is what I want to be, what do I have to do to become that? And so now you do your goals. And goals are very specific. They have a definite beginning and a definite ending point, and they have some signposts along the way. So if I want to be a better father, when I go back to those goals when my kids were younger particularly, if I want to be a better father, what if I said, to do that, I'm going to spend Monday evenings with my kids doing something they like to do besides watching television. And I'm going to start that on October 1st, and I'm going to do that through January 1st. When I get to January 1st, am I a better father? Don't know really. But could I answer yes or no to the question that I spent Monday evenings for 3 hours doing something with my kids that they wanted to do? Could I answer yes or no to that? That's what to-do statements give me. They give me the ability to say yes or no. Am I setting goals that help me be what I want to be? Purposes sit in judgment of goals. Those goals sit in judgment of the activity. Am I doing what I said I wanted to do to become what I said I wanted to become? Most of us, when we want to get a handle on our time, we start with activity. And we cut some stuff out, and it's like cleaning out a drawer. After a while, it's all mucked back up again. And if we try to get rid of activity, it fills back in. And so as a church and personally, and each of our ministries does this, we answer the question, what do we want to be? What do we have to do to become that? And then we look at what are we actually doing. And here's the fascinating, phenomenal thing. So often in the church for us, me, and so often in my personal life, I'm not doing the things I said I wanted to do to be what I said I wanted to be. And so there are some obvious questions. Why not? Maybe I don't really want to be that. Our church wanted to be a church that was more engaged in the community. So we started setting some goals for that. And then we looked at our activity list, and I got to tell you, it didn't match up. I know churches that want to be more evangelistic, and they set goals for that, but then when they look at all the stuff they're doing, doesn't match up with that. Are you doing what you said you wanted to do to be what you said you wanted to be? Purpose sits in judgment of goals. Goals sit in judgment of activity. Most of us manage it the other way around. And it always eats our lunch the other way around. Okay, let me give you the other two before I run out of time here very quickly. The next one is the principle of no competition. Andrew Carnegie said, commit yourself without reservation to serving the needs of others and you'll have no competition. It's the service principle, really. The principle of no competition is the service principle. And in our world today, you serve others, you're generous and gracious to others. When you're at a restaurant, when you're in a hotel, when you're in a taxi, if you're just kind and gracious and serve, you'll have no and the church that serves will have no competition. And this ought to be something we get, but we don't. Because the truth is, generally as Christians, we're no more servant-hearted than the average person. Commit yourself without reservation to serving the needs of others, and nobody will compete with you. The sixth one is the Pike principle. I need to do this one pretty quick. Researchers back in the 60s did an experiment. They had a 100-gallon tank, and they put a northern pike fish in there. And every day around 4 o'clock, they fed the fish its favorite food, these minnows, this pike. And man, he had a great life. He was swimming around there every day. Food showed up. He didn't have to go far for it. It was right there. And then one day they took the tank and they divided it in half with a sheet of plexiglass. And the pike went swimming over and it was swimming around in a circle. And then they put the minnows in on the other side. And he went swimming to get his food and boom, up against the glass. And I have no idea how big a pike's brain is, but several times it rammed the glass. And then it started just doing circles around the glass. And then they pulled the piece of plexiglass out, and guess what happened to the pike? Starved to death. Its favorite food swimming all around it, bumping off its snout, swimming against its underbelly, because the pike had been convinced that those minnows were no longer available to him. I meet a lot of leaders who are convinced, well, others seem to be able to do this, but that's not for us. Other ministries accomplish this, but that's not for us. Unless your performance is dictated by what can be, what the possibilities are before you, your effectiveness will always be dictated by what has been. Because that old past tape keeps playing over. And we all have a natural rut. And we work hard. We'll come to a conference like Shofar, and boy, we get excited. We jerk it up out of the rut a little bit. But then we get home, and life goes on, and boom, we're back in that groove that's been etched pretty deep for us. And it takes some effort to get out of that. Let me give you the last principle. It's pretty simple. It's called the Genesis principle, which says this: in the beginning, there was a beginning. Everything starts with a first step. And it is the first step that is always the hardest step. The shuttle launches in the U.S., I don't know if you've seen them on the news, they're always impressive. I lived in Florida, and we were 100 miles away across the coast, but the night launches particularly we could see very well, and even the daytime launches, they were spectacular. I remember I was sitting in a restaurant when the Challenger blew up, and one of our friends said, "Come out here." And we went out in the parking lot, and you could see those two plumes of smoke still in the sky. 3/4 of the fuel, they put millions and millions and millions of pounds of fuel in to launch these rockets. And 3/4 of the fuel is burned up in the launch. And that shuttle are thousands of pounds of fuel, and they travel millions of miles. And 3/4 of the fuel gets burned up in the launch. Because the getting started, the getting going, is always the hardest. Well, I have no idea what God's laid on your heart. I have no idea the kind of ministries that you're trying to push together, merge together to get somewhere, or the things that you're doing in your business or whatever they may be. But I am convinced that God has you in that place to accomplish what He wants to accomplish. And sometimes we just get so stuck ourselves. And so I hope you'll take that first step, and I hope a conference like this is one that really helps encourage you to launch on that.